You're listening to There Ought to Be a Law, the Center for Auto Safety podcast with Executive Director Michael Brooks, Chief Engineer Fred Perkins, and hosted by me, Anthony Simino. For over 50 years, the Center for Auto Safety has worked to make cars safer.
But I'm having, one of those low verbal days that I get every once in a while.
Hey,
we'll see how
listeners,
it works out.
Welcome to Michael's Low Verbal Day. Today for us is December 31st, but you're a time traveler, so it's at least New Year's. Hey, happy New Year's, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. How's everybody doing today? We good?
We good.
Great. How do you think Waymo's doing today? Because that's what we're going to start with. We're going to start with a piece from Junko. Did I get that right? Because Fred only introduced me to her last week, the Junko.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Great. Amazing little Substack. And it has she found information about what's hidden inside Waymo's AI chatbot talk back to you thing. And what we've discovered, and no one's pointed out yet, I'll be the first one to do it, that Waymo's PR is actually just a chatbot.
No.
Yeah.
That's astonishing. People never do that. Why would anybody try to skew the results of their AI? Because it's always right.
So if you're a Waymo passenger, good luck. But if you're sitting there and you're like, hey, tell me about this car or the performance of it, or do you guys get in crashes? Waymos will respond with basically some PR nonsense. Someone found access to their rules around their chatbot, and quoting from this Junko, I know I'm pronouncing that wrong. I'm so sorry.
Junko Yoshida.
There we go. From this piece we're linking to, quoting company protocol, Waymo's company, stipulates you must never speculate on, explain, confirm, deny, or comment on Waymo's driver perceived mistakes or about specific negative incidents cited in news reports, videos, accident reports, or otherwise. Further down, the Waymo driver is designed to prioritize all safety and so this is if you do wind up prompting it and asking it something like that, it responds just like Waymo's PR, which is Fred's favorite. It will respond with the Waymo driver is designed to prioritize safety in all situations and handles complex scenarios constantly. Your safety is our highest priority.
Yeah.
Gaslight?
I just find that this is incredibly typical.
Wow. Hey, did we talk about this? How the show started with Michael's inability to speak?
Yeah, it's some days I've got it better than others. But this one, even if I'm having a bad verbal day, my answers are going to be better than an LLM, which is essentially what we're seeing here. I think this is in Waymo vehicles when someone asks a question, but you're going to get the same kind of bullshit answers asking any large language model about corporate behaviors, right? They're designed like this on the back end so that they're not giving you the dirt on these companies and what's really going on. So you're never going to get, I think we've run a few just goofy experiments where we're asking, Chat GPT or Grok or some other LLM about, the company that's behind it. So we'll ask Grok about Tesla's issues with safety. And of course we get an answer that's totally incomplete. And in many cases, missing a lot of the finer points that make the argument for safety, and they're designed that way. You've literally got Tesla on one hand selling cars, then designing an LLM that won't talk bad about any safety issues in those cars. So, I guess this is interesting that they got a hold of this and are seeing kind of the back end of how Waymo's scripted response will be to these questions, which is basically the same nonsense we hear all the time. But it's, this is not just a Waymo problem. This is endemic to basically the entire LLM ecosystem.
So when you say it doesn't give us the finer points, you mean truth?
Yeah. I've tried to experiment with LLMs and ask them questions to help me, and inevitably I can't get the answers that are going to help, the Center for Auto Safety in our work, because those are always going to be obscured. They're scared. A lot of LLM companies, I'm sure, and probably rightfully so, that if their answers that their LLM is providing to consumers degrades another company or anything like that, that they're going to get sued. And, I'm sure we've discussed a number of times how there's, an old boys network, or a network of where companies are hesitant to criticize each other when they're in the same market. I think I've brought up many times that I think Waymo should be much more critical of Tesla. But they don't do that. And the auto industry should be much more critical of some of the steps Tesla's taken, but they don't do that. And so when you're a large company designing an LLM, are you going to design your LLM to be critical of all your corporate buddies? No. So this is, something that is, I think, a major problem with AI, and also points out the need for independent AIs that aren't tied to, the market and tied to investors, and that can actually present independent views that probably are going to be a lot closer to the truth than what these other models are spitting out.
Just a reminder to our listeners who may not be as familiar with this as we are, LLM means large language model, and that is the structure behind what are usually called AI models. So when you ask ChatGPT, what's the best recipe for cupcakes, it goes to an LLM to find that answer. Unfortunately, the same resolution that applies to cupcakes, they're now applying to driving cars.
Oh, God. I'm just more afraid. But I look at this Waymo's responses as another vote for human drivers. Maybe I'm unique, but I've talked to a lot of cab drivers over the years. I've learned a lot of great things about their local music, because primarily they're all, recent immigrants, and they're more than happy to talk to you about where they're from. And so you get to travel the world while you're in a cab for a bit. You get exposed to different music. You get to find out what they think about what's going on, how long they've been driving on that shift. You get to hear them complain about the car they're driving, which is great.
Yeah.
You get
other drivers.
Yeah, other drivers. You get to see amazing hand gestures that are not native to my country, that are just unbelievable. It's a better experience. But again, these things are designed by shut-ins who don't like people or human interaction. That's my thought. Anyway, but let's continue with more of the wonderful world of Waymo. So, hey, if you're looking for a job, Waymo is hiring. They're hiring you to close their doors. Because again, you don't have humans, and you get into a cab and you leave your cab and you don't, fully close the door and whatnot. When there's a dirty, stinking human, they can get out and curse you and close the door. Or they can yell at you, be like, hey, buddy, close the door. Oh, okay. Not a big deal. But when there's no human driver, what does it do? The car apparently talks to people. From the Washington Post, on a quote, Don Adkins was walking along the Sunset Strip in Los Angeles late one night this month when he heard a plea for help. Please close the right side rear door. Thanks. Adkins recalled a synthetic voice calling out. It came from a Jaguar SUV stopped in the street with lights flashing. One of the hundreds of Waymo robo-taxis in LA operated by Alphabet was in trouble. So Waymo has an army of people who get paid to go around closing doors and who knows, maybe removing flyers from windshields or everything else. But hey, the human's the problem. Remember that, folks. Isn't that their business model, that we need to eliminate humans except for mechanical
certainly
things?
Something that has been mentioned.
No, that hasn't been mentioned. That's just my imagination.
Has.
Oh, it has.
No, it
okay.
absolutely has. Yes. This problem is there's a couple things here. The first thing is a lot of the autonomous vehicles that are being developed, and I think virtually every autonomous vehicle that comes out in the future, maybe once NHTSA gets its regulations in shape to allow the creation of new vehicles that don't have to completely meet some of the more human aspects of the vehicle safety standards, they're going to have automatic doors that open and close themselves, because I mean, just reading this article, it's quite clear that humans or the riders aren't always going to shut the doors appropriately, and the doors have to be latched and closed before the vehicle can operate again. So essentially, if someone gets out of a Waymo, I don't know that people are leaving the door wide open, but maybe some people are. Some people are closing the door, but a seatbelt's getting caught in it, or the door's not fully shutting. And so the Waymo, and they walk away. And so the Waymo is basically sitting there going, oh, I can't go anywhere until my door's shut. And I have no way of doing that, which is a problem. And so I think Waymo is contracting you or working with this other app. I think it's called Honk, where they basically send out a signal to tow companies or to, I don't know who else can participate, if it's limited to tow companies or not, but it essentially calls someone using an app to come shut the vehicle door so it can continue operating, which is interesting in a lot of ways. I mean, I think one of the more troubling things about the system is that it seems like a lot of the, now that we live in a world where everything's monetized, the prices that they're paying people to go perform these services are very, very low. And a lot of the tow companies were raising questions about that. But also this problem was, essentially created for Waymo by the fact that they are not producing vehicles that meet federal motor vehicle safety standards. They're having to take their software, put it in vehicles that meet federal motor vehicle safety standards. And, the vast majority of motor vehicles out there that meet federal motor vehicle safety standards do not have automatic doors that are going to shut themselves. So you're totally relying on the human in that circumstance. I think a manufacturer like Zoox, for instance, in their funny little pods driving around, those have automatic doors and won't run into similar problems like this, although they will run into the tow issues.
No, there's no way to eliminate this problem because, like you said, a seatbelt or something gets stuck between the door closing and the door well, or someone drops something in there that gets jammed, or, there's a billion scenarios where there's no way to solve this without those dirty, stinking humans.
Well, you will eliminate some of the, I didn't shut the door hard enough guys, which I'm guessing is the majority of the issue here. Folks just not completely securing the door when they leave.
I don't know if you guys have experienced this with the minivans with the doors. You just kind of like tap on the handle once and it closes itself. Mm-hmm. Because I think I've been in dozens of these, and I think I've only experienced one that actually works. I mean, these things are constantly broken. So I mean, yes, maybe technology can eliminate 99% of these issues, but there's that 1% where honk is going to be honking for somebody to come fix my robot. That's my thinking. Let's jump into the last Waymo story. God, I hope it's the last Waymo story. Waymo suing the city of Santa Monica, and Santa Monica is suing Waymo. So San Francisco had a similar problem where Waymo set up a 24-hour charging parking lot station, and the vehicles, as they go in there, they start honking and beeping all 3 hours of the night. And, hey, look, man, you living in Santa Monica, you're not going to put up with noise. Of course not. And reasonably so. And so they sued the city. They sued Waymo saying, hey, you guys are creating a public nuisance, and Waymo's like, nah, we told you about it. And so now it's gotten so some Santa Monica residents, quoting from, I believe it's also another Washington Post article, quoting, cars beeping as they reverse into and out of spots overnight. And this has caused some angry residents took to blocking the path of the driverless vehicles, blocking the driveways into the charging stations, and placing orange cones in the area to hinder their routes and create backups, a practice several have called stacking the Waymos. My most upsetting part of this stacking the Waymos is that Fred Perkins did not come up with this, or even a better moniker. There we go. Stacking the Waymos. I love it. Mike, would you have a better title to come up with this?
Well, I mean, this whole situation is troublesome because it essentially shows that Waymo doesn't believe it needs to be a good citizen, right? I mean, they're keeping the residents of this area awake. They're bugging the hell out of them all night, too. And so when the city steps in, just like they'd step in if your neighbor's having a loud party next door, Waymo is saying, "Oh, you can't do that to us. We're going to sue you and prevent you from enforcing nuisance laws." It's not like the city is coming in and saying, your vehicles are unsafe and you can't operate them, or doing something that's outside of what a city might normally be doing. This is a very long time, city power to enforce nuisance laws, and, anything like this is clearly an issue that a city needs to be regulating, and not, the state, not the federal government. And this is one of our concerns around the AV industry's attempt to preempt localities from regulating them in any way. This is Waymo saying, your local laws don't apply to us, even if we're not being a responsible citizen. It's troubling, and I think this is what they're going to try to do in any city they're in, is try to get their way, try to put their priorities over the priorities of the citizens of those localities. And I think we've seen that play out in San Francisco and in other areas. But this is something that has to be resolved, right? I mean, how can you either you need to move your charging places or to areas where they're not in densely populated residential zones, or you need to find a way to make your cars charge themselves silently without all these beeps and all the other stuff that's involved. I mean, it seems like eliminating the beeps when they pull into a charging area wouldn't be all that hard of a fix. Yet Waymo seems to be claiming that it's some kind of really burdensome task to make their vehicles quieter. And I just don't buy that. I just think Waymo doesn't want a locality telling them what to do. And they're trying to set a precedent here where they have more power in the areas where they deploy than the actual officials from those areas.
Just by the way, ultrasonic alerts and ultrasonic sensors on the cars would allow them to beep each other until they're happy, while not annoying any of the human beings who are in the neighborhood. Just a thought.
Well, I checked with Waymo's chat AI, and it said that Waymos are not beeping. They're producing a pleasant musical F note.
Oh, honks are good for your health.
So every time you hear a Waymo beep, it's just saying F. Okay. But Michael, you're pointing out that, Waymo is going to fight this in cities all over the place. And how are they going to fight it? Through lobbying, which consists of making donations to politicians. But you know how you can fight back? Yep, we're living in a new world, a new time. It's 2026. Holy cow, we made it. You can go to autosafety.org, click on donate, and start the new year fresh. That's right. Wipe off that dirty Waymo smell, and we'll begin anew.
I was just thinking that, when the Waymo signs an F, a lot of humans say F too.
There you go. Thanks for playing. Okay.
Sorry. Well, that could have been funny in the right context, I guess.
Let's do a follow-up to a story which we've covered in the past, which is really one of our big stories of 2025, a little company called Kia Hyundai. And I think this might have been even a 2024 story as well.
This was going, I mean, this started in pretty soon after the pandemic began. I think in 2021, late 2021 is when we started seeing the thefts occur.
Yeah. So just to remind listeners, this is when all the kids were on the TikTok and said, wait a second, I can use a USB cable to steal a car. And I watched kids outside my window do this. It was amazing. According from an article in the Associated Press, automakers Hyundai and Kia must offer free repairs to automakers Hyundai and Kia. That's like, retailers Sears and Roebuck. It's funny.
Yeah, well, they go through pretty big pains to pretend that they're separate companies.
All right. So anyway, quoting, automakers Hyundai and Kia must offer free repairs to millions of models under a settlement announced Tuesday by Minnesota's Attorney General, who led an effort by dozens of states that argued that the vehicles weren't equipped with proper anti-theft technology, leaving them vulnerable to thefts. That's great, right? We're happy.
I mean, I'm happy that this occurred because it's going to actually get a repair available on these vehicles that goes beyond the software fix that's not completely worked. that still has only reached, I want to say, 60% of all Hyundai and Kias that are affected. They're going to put, I think it's like a sleeve around the ignition area that prevents, I think it's a zinc sleeve that's intended to stop thieves from cracking open the ignition cylinder and starting the car. So it's an actual, it may not be a complete fix, right? I mean, I don't know how hard it is to break a zinc sleeve. It's going to make it a whole lot harder, maybe along the lines of the club, maybe even harder for thieves to quickly and easily steal these vehicles. And, particularly the teenagers whose attention spans are probably a little less than a professional thief. But the problem here is that it took this long, right? I mean, we're sitting here 4 years or so after this problem began. We've seen, dozens of deaths and injuries to a lot of teenage unlicensed drivers because of this problem. And the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration kind of just shrugged at it. I argued that they have a duty here because they've created this problem, right? They gave manufacturers the option to either put an engine immobilizer into the vehicles or to do a basically parts labeling to prevent theft. And Hyundai and Kia, unlike every other manufacturer, chose the labeling route, didn't put engine immobilizers in. As part of the settlement, now they're required to do that going forward. They were already doing that. They're also required to pay $4 million or so of restitution. I don't know how that's possibly going to cover the thousands of vehicles that were ultimately stolen. But even more than that, you've got to ask questions about, NHTSA in many respects created this problem by not requiring immobilizers on vehicles sooner, which they should have done. I believe those were required in Canada and a lot of other countries. But not in the United States. And also, why was this not elevated to a defect investigation? Why did NHTSA feel that it couldn't perform or order the companies to do a recall exactly like this? Why are the states cleaning up NHTSA's mess here is a big question. And I think that's a question we need to ask, not just about this situation, but looking at, the autonomous driving industry now, looking at Tesla robo-taxi, looking at a lot of things that are going on, asking the question, why are we relying on the federal government to take on these tasks and at the same time trying to preempt states from taking similar actions when it's pretty clear at this point that the federal government is not going to be able to keep up with a lot of safety issues that are occurring?
Michael, how do they get to choose to use a zinc sleeve on this? Because now I'm not a metal scientist, and nor there's Fred, but I'm going to lean on Fred here because they're using zinc because it's dirt cheap, I imagine. But zinc's also weak. Can you just put a little piece of stainless steel on it and eventually that zinc will just disintegrate?
If they put anything on it that's a physical barrier, someone's going to cut through it in a few seconds with a power tool. So zinc is soft and weak compared to a lot of other metals. I don't think stainless steel would have solved the problem in any meaningful way.
All right. Well,
it's ultimately, it's not going to be foolproof. It is going to be a much better deterrent, I think. Clearly a better deterrent, I think, than the software supposed fix that doesn't seem to be working.
Well, who's a fool, and I have proof, and this is a dark transition. I'm sorry. Quoting from The Guardian, the social media creator who allegedly hit and killed a pedestrian as she hosted a live stream while simultaneously driving through a Chicago suburb has been arrested, according to authorities. I told you it was not a great transition. But what happened is I think the technical term is asshole, was live streaming while they're driving. And they're, talking to their TikTok people, thought, hey, I have a green light. They didn't, and they ran over a pedestrian, which is horrible. Horrible. What makes it even worse is this monster of a person then went on to TikTok and asked for donations that would support her taking mental leave amid a lot of shit going on. End quote. The quick takeaway is you're driving you're behind the wheel, put your phone down.
I mean, I think another takeaway would be that we need to. I mean, is there not a way to prevent this from occurring when someone's driving a car? I mean, I think that's an issue that driver monitoring or effective driver monitoring systems could address at some point, because clearly, if you're looking into a camera and interacting with an audience live, you are not. There got to be ways for the vehicle to detect that, whether it's looking at your eyes or your movements. You know, there's got to be a way. And this isn't just an isolated incident. And we don't know if this happened before, because I'm sure there are people who have been recording videos while they're driving and had crashes, and they simply weren't caught, right? There was an accident and the police may have never even looked at their phone or looked at their social media to see what they might have been doing at the time. And, you know, for all we know, they aren't filming with phones. They could be filming with other sources that, you know, were never recovered from the crash. So I would go on a limb and say this isn't the first time this has happened, but it's certainly an example of something that I think is happening a lot. This is I've seen recently kind of a compilation of people who are streaming while they drive and having crashes. And this certainly isn't the only incident of that. And, you know, it's more stupid human tricks that autonomous vehicles are going to solve for us in the future, right?
Right. So this relates to a serious question I ran across this weekend while driving. Is I'm looking at somebody, if they're live streaming or whatnot, they're a dangerous person on the road. If you're on the highway and you see someone driving erratically, dangerously, what do you do? Like, is the correct
Grappler.
move? Yeah, the grappler, I agree, is the correct move, but my wife won't let me get it installed. But seriously, what do you do? Do we speed up and get away from them, or do we slow down and wait for them to disappear into the distance?
I would always say slowing down is better, and contacting the authorities. You know, there's no harm in being a tattletale when somebody could die, right?
Okay. Fred, what would you do?
I would go into a larger context and say that the automobiles should be designed with all of their computing capability to alert people when it's being driven recklessly or dangerously. You know, we've talked about this before. If it's being driven by a drunk, it should flash lights or beep horns or do something so that the pedestrians and the other people on the road can perform a defensive action. In this case, you know, this poor guy was walking across the street with a couple of bags of groceries, and it had the light, and she just plowed into him. But had the car given some alert, the odds are pretty good that he would have responded to that alert and you know, stayed alive. So I think we need a shift in emphasis from protecting exclusively the people inside the car to protecting the people outside of the car. This bleeds over into the AV world as well, but I'm answering your question broadly.
I think that there's an even better, you know, way to address this that might not even involve this specific type of thing, that might not even involve, you know, auto manufacturers having to add new technology to their vehicles, but it's the platforms that are allowing for this type of video to be posted in the first place or filmed. You know, why aren't they cracking down the dangerous behavior? Because if you know you're not allowed to post videos of yourself online, they're going to demonetize you. They're going to remove your video from their platform. If you post something like that, then there's absolutely no incentive to do that in the first place. And I think that would be the quickest way by far to eliminate this type of behavior.
All right, listeners, write in. Tell me what you do when you see some erratic behavior on the highway. Because my tendency is always to speed up, get right next to the person, flip them off, and then speed in front of them, and brake check them. No, Michael's not happy with that response.
I just don't believe you, because you wouldn't be alive doing that in New York for 50 years, right?
No, I would not. Hey, don't reveal my true age. I need acting roles. No. Oh God. Let's
that would make you what, 66, since you didn't get your license until 16. So.
Right. So let's I think it's time, listeners, you've been with us this long. Let's do our Gaslight roundup of the year. We want to do this as our skid mark award for we each choose somebody or something
Yeah.
that does it. And so low hanging fruit, gonna win right off the bat. Elon Musk, everything he says. And I'm going to be very specific. So he said there'd be over 500 robo-taxis operating in the Austin area by the end of the year. They currently have like a dozen. And they're not even autonomous because they've got somebody sitting behind the wheel. And then
at least in the vehicle and maybe back in the remote operations center.
Right, exactly. So they're paying 2 humans to drive you around. That's their business model.
Yeah.
They'll get subsidies for this somehow. So Elon Musk, that's my skid mark of 2025. Michael Brooks.
Yeah, I mean, you left out a lot of Elon from this year. I think the Doge stuff was pretty good reason to hand him the award immediately as well. I mean, I guess his funding of the presidential campaign occurred in 2024, so that doesn't necessarily come up this year.
That's not really auto safety related.
Really?
Well, it's not okay. Yeah, I could have. Yes, we could spend the next 12 hours doing Elon. Ew.
Yeah, we really could, and that's unfortunate that he has that type of prominence in this industry. Elon would be my number one nominee. I'd also, with a nod to the Trump administration generally for their support of some of those activities that have, resulted in NHTSA's budget being cut at a time when, they had reached staffing levels that were far more appropriate to accomplish their jobs. The new administration came in and, with the help of Doge, essentially fired a significant percentage of the agency. I've seen estimates that are as high as 25%. And particularly in areas like automated safety, where the agency needs more help than ever now. And beyond that, there's a continual kind of barrage of nonsense coming from either Trump or Secretary Duffy around transportation issues, when they're telling us one thing when the opposite is oftentimes true, which, is the centerpiece of what gaslighting is. So they're on my list, as well as, our newest entry is Bernie Moreno, Senator Bernie Moreno, who, as a former car dealer, is intent on preventing safety features from becoming standard in vehicles. And, which is a horrible position, because ultimately all that does is prevent good safety technology from making its way into everyone's car. And it becomes something that only rich people have because they could afford it at an option. So he is certainly in there as well. I also wanted to nominate AI generally, and without going into depth on that, because we've talked about it ad nauseum, even at the start of this episode, AI is probably the biggest gaslight that exists in America at this point. I know Fred's got some.
I'm going with anybody who says, well, safety is our first priority.
So I'm going to jump in there. So you're going back to
safety. Safety is our first priority.
I love it. Yeah. Wait, safety is our priority.
Present company accepted. Present company accepted.
So that means you're going back to Ford Motor Company in like when did they start doing that nonsense, in the 70s, saying job one or something?
Quality. That was quality.
No, they did say safety, didn't they? Safety is
no, they said quality, and clearly they've given up on quality since. But okay, so I have two extensive list, and I've got 3 particular companies that I'm using as focus. But first, all AV developers say the safety is their first or highest priority, but no AV developer has disclosed their safety requirements, their goals, key safety indicators, or means of tracking progress. No developer has agreed to independent audit for any independent standards, such as UL 4600. That includes any normative statements. So a normative statement is any statement that says, you shall do this. So there are some standards, or there are some documents out there that pretend to be standards. Most of them the product of the Automated Vehicle Safety Coalition, but in none of those documents does the word shall appear. So it's extensive smokescreen so they can pretend to be really attentive to safety while completely ignoring it. No AV developer has embraced an affirmative safety definition, saying what safety is. They all say something safety isn't. They say safety is the absence of unreasonable risk. What the hell does that mean? And how do you measure that?
It's a slide rule.
No AV or rideshare operator requires or reasonably offers the opportunity for customers to read and understand the terms of service, particularly relinquishment of customer rights before engaging the customer. AV developers don't disclose to regulators or customers what any of the residual risks are of their operating. So you're operating lethal machinery, potentially lethal machinery, in public without any physical safeguards. That's a dangerous proposition. It wouldn't be allowed in any other industry, but they blithely go ahead and do that and say, well, safety is our number one priority. A couple examples. Zoox pretends that they've met federal motor vehicle safety standards, but they got called on that. So instead, they applied for an extensive exemption from the safety standards using a section of the law that is not applicable under any other administration. So basically, they made up a new ruling that isn't really a ruling that gives them what they want. They operate in Las Vegas under that FMVSS exemption without warning customers that it's non-compliant with standard safety requirements. So I don't think that's consistent with safety as our first priority. Tesla designs and sells cars and trucks with hidden and practically inaccessible emergency door latch releases. They design and sell vehicles that trap individuals inside of cars when the 12-volt power fails, even when the car is on fire, with no way for outside persons to rescue the passengers. They deploy driving automation technology that can dangerously be used even outside of the intended design limits. They advertise unsafe use of its driving control systems, force customers to sue and prove product defect in the event of a crash, and pay cash settlements for lethal defects rather than engineering fixes as the price of doing business. So that's kind of inconsistent with safety as our first priority. Waymo, communications breakdown can paralyze the entire service area. They force customers to accept binding arbitration for its terms of service. They operated its vehicles for years with software that did not stop for school buses loading or unloading children. It's still not clear that they've fixed that, even though it's been called to their attention. They refuse to stand down operations upon request from regulators, even after repeated instances of illegal and hazardous behavior around school buses and driving through deployed stop signs and flashing red lights. Upon killing cats and dogs, they blame the animals.
I'm sorry, that's horrible for me to laugh, but
well, that's safety is our first priority, so kill the animals, I guess. I'm gonna also include Uber in this. They don't do any personal interviews for the drivers.
Oh, right. This is horrible. This is we never specifically got to this, but there's a New York Times investigation that Uber didn't do background checks on its drivers and basically showing that they've hired a lot of sexual predators and bad people. And they're just like, that hasn't happened in the last couple of years. They're okay.
Right. So they do some checks, but they don't check driver records for civil penalties of any kind. So our president, who's been convicted of sexually abusing a woman, would be allowed to drive for Uber or for Lyft after he leaves office, which will hopefully be soon. But it's good to know he's got a second career in store for him. Uber has not developed improved screening techniques, just what Anthony said, despite a long history of violence against passengers, including sexual violence. In fact, they say, well, these are independent operators. We've got no control over them. They're not our employees. So they just kind of wash their hands of all those safety issues.
I wonder if they'll try that. If AV companies will try that with their computer drivers. Oh,
they're going to start. They're going to push back on the robots.
Yeah, be like, yeah. The Waymo driver doesn't actually work for us. They're just an independent contractor.
That's right. Some damn software developer did it. We have nothing to do with it. Again, going back to Uber, they force compliance with binding arbitration for its terms of service without requiring customer notification. Did I just say that? And,
I'm not listening.
And now they're configuring it so that the Uber is going to summon Waymos. So you've got cascading terms of service, all of which protect the companies instead of the passengers. And Michael, how does that going to work? Do you have any idea? You got terms of service for Uber that are horrible, coupled with terms of service for Waymo that are horrible.
I would just say good luck if you're a consumer not being forced into a court of arbitration. I mean, because you're going to be battling multiple binding arbitration agreements and your use after you agree to the user agreement.
Well, the only reason I summoned my Uber was to get into my Waymo so I can go to law school. Aye.
That's pretty good. Finally, for Uber, they refuse responsibility for injuring their customers if the injured customer has previously used Uber Eats.
All right.
Terms of service.
No, not even if the user has, if their teenage daughter has, in that case.
So, again, a lot of evidence that safety is our first priority is not really the ethos for these companies. Clearly, operations are the first priority and return on capital is close behind. Or I'm not sure which order that would be in, but safety is clearly not the first priority. So that's my nominee for the Bullshit of the Year award.
That's pretty good. Now, I was gonna be very magnanimous and have us all be winners this week, but Fred, you win because you made me laugh out loud. So that's how that goes.
It's about time for crying out loud.
We have to give the award to somebody, and Fred nominated multiple companies.
Yeah, so it goes to Elon.
It has to go to Elon.
Oh, man.
Elon, we're going to have that trophy to you sometime around Q3 next year.
Yeah, there we go. Good. But I'm going to do a specific gaslight for this week. Very specifically this week, I'm going to give it to Senator Ted Cruz. Because Senator Ted Cruz, he's a man of the people when he's not vacationing in
which
Mexico.
People?
I don't know which people. Wolverine fan club people. Anyway, so he's putting together an affordability hearing and where he wants to bring the heads of the three automakers, the U.S. automakers, to come there. And he's like, let me schedule it the same time of their biggest trade show, which is just basically saying, I don't expect anyone to show up. And the fascinating thing is he asks for the head of Ford and GM and Stellantis, but not the head of Tesla, which is a U.S. auto company. Instead, he asked for the VP of engineering, which is funny because I guess he's afraid of the ketamine kid. And so,
it's interesting that I mean, I think that's a big reason why they're getting some pushback from, I think, your bromance man, Farley. They're not willing to come and appear at the hearing when you're not requiring the CEO of Tesla to come in and talk about this stuff. You're letting them bring in their VP of engineering, who probably has a little bit more to say on the matter. Maybe, I think that, this is a lot of exercise in public relations here. They don't want to, appear to be less than knowledgeable on the subject they're brought in to talk about. But, you've got to think that a CEO knows a lot of things, but they're not probably going to be the best witness when it comes to a hearing on the affordability of safety equipment. And it appears that Stellantis and General Motors are also hesitant to commit to the hearing if Ford's not going to commit. And it doesn't look like Ford's going to commit unless Elon shows up. So who knows what the status of that hearing is. It's a hearing that never should have been set up in the first place. It's set up around some of the nonsense that Bernie Moreno has been spouting about safety as a former and maybe We're not sure where his holdings lie in the car dealerships at this point. But it's the entire hearing idea is very stupid. It has no basis in reality. Safety equipment is actually comparatively cheap when you consider the impact that it has on our economy and the benefits that it provides to Americans across the board, economically and physically from a safety perspective. So I'm sitting here hoping that the hearing, is a flop, because it should have been and it was destined to be.
Yeah. So all the automakers, starting with Ford, is like, yeah, I'm not showing, but it's Cruise. Like, you can, schedule this a different week. Like,
yeah, just schedule it for a week when the Detroit Auto Show isn't going on. That requires all of the CEOs and basically every higher up in the auto industry is going to be attending that. I mean, it's their Super Bowl week.
It's pretty crazy. And I'm not sure. I'm trying to look at how long this person's the VP of engineering at Tesla. The article actually doesn't specify which VP of engineering, because they have numerous VP of engineering, and their software engineering head and their AI engineering head have only been on the job for less than a year. I think it's somebody who's been at the company for a long time, but I can't tell how long they've had that role. Not that it matters.
It's Lars.
Well,
Lars Moravi. I don't know how long he's been there. But
he's been at the company for a long time, but I don't know how long he's had that role, because Tesla just, they're kind of like Putin's government. Some people get pushed out windows, and we just keep replacing people all the time. Is that more? Maybe it's more like Stalin. Oh, there we go. But before we jump into our New Year's resolutions, let's do a Tesla story, since I mentioned it. Tesla has and this is just a fun, cute little story about Tesla has put out their fees now for if you dirty their robo-taxis. So if you get sick inside the robo-taxi, it's $150. If you spill your coffee or put in excessive dirt, it's $50. I don't think this necessarily is unreasonable. What I find unreasonable is the arbitrator of this is Tesla, and they're just going to assume, yep, you did this, you caused this problem, we're going to bill you right away. And if you disagree, good luck.
Good luck. Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to, go to small claims court? Well, can you go to small claims court if you've agreed to their arbitration provisions?
It's
doubtful.
Know.
Yeah. And do you really think you're going to get a fair hearing in a court of arbitration? And you know what? How many people are actually going to avail themselves of that? Who knows? I personally, if someone is vomiting or doing worse in an automated vehicle, they deserve a significant charge, right? I mean, you can't blame the companies for charging them. I think it's the enforcement of this. These vehicles aren't going back to a centralized location where a human is checking them out, I don't think, constantly in between drives. So how are they going to determine that one passenger did X, Y, and Z versus another? Are they monitoring you by video and everything you do, like Waymo seems to be doing? We're not really sure, but there's a lot of, I don't think there's enough here to understand how the enforcement is going to take place, how they're going to make these determinations, and how they're going to ensure that people aren't unfairly charged, and that when someone is unfairly charged, that they have a way to dispute that fairly.
Well, this will come up in our future, in the next couple of weeks, our terms of service episode. Ooh. And then maybe in that period of time, Tesla will let us know who pooped in the Tesla. How do you decide? Was it my poop in the Tesla?
Like a children's book.
Exactly. Because my guess is it's going to be Elon. Always Elon. And we're going to do genetic testing to find out. That's his 100 children. And with that, let's jump to our predictions for the year 2026. I predict that humans will stop driving and AI will take us everywhere we go. The cost of energy will reach zero. I don't know. I think safety will become I don't know.
You're struggling.
Yeah, I got not because it's not. I don't think positive. Like I think NHTSA there'll be 7 people left by the end of the year.
You're not Nostradamus. Well, I can predict some things pretty simple. There's one thing that I would put a lot of money on right now, and is that Ford is going to have fewer recalls next year in 2026 than it did in 2025. I mean, they didn't just break the record; they blew it out of the water for the number of vehicle recalls. This is the last day of the year, but the recalls still haven't all flowed in. Usually that takes about a week into the new year before we've seen every recall that was filed in 2025. But I think right now Ford is in the low to mid 140s. I believe the largest number of vehicle recalls prior to this year was less than half of that by a single manufacturer.
And that was Ford as well, wasn't it?
I think Ford was up there. Yeah, it could have also been Forest River, which is an RV company. It has an inordinately large number of recalls every year. But this is, this is the year where Ford kind of went back and did all of that work. I think a significant portion of the recalls that they performed this year were actually recalls. So they were redos of recalls that didn't quite meet standards. And so in some respects, it looks like they're going to have to go down significantly next year. So that's probably the easiest prediction of the year. Another prediction would be, and I don't think any of us could disagree with this, is that, the robo bullshit is going to continue unabated. We're going to continue to hear nonsense comparing human and robot drivers without sufficient data to support those comparisons. And we're going to continue to see these companies push back on any and all regulation, whether it's at the city and state level up through the federal level. And the other thing that's really, really on the rise and is becoming a significant concern is manufacturers pushing convenience technology over safety technology. We're seeing all this hype around hands-off, eyes-off features that don't promise any safety, and in fact, in many cases, make us worried the opposite's going to happen, while these same companies are stalling on technology like automatic emergency braking, which should be going into vehicles now, speed limiting devices, which has already been going into vehicles in Europe for a number of years, and America has decided to do nothing there, even though speeding is one of the major contributors to death and injury on our roads. Impairment prevention tech is basically the driving subject for that crazy Cruz and Moreno hearing. And, things like vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to vehicle technology that have long been delayed and offer some pretty awesome solutions for safety. And even beyond that, we're seeing, simple things, rear seatbelt warnings. Manufacturers are still trying to get those rules overturned. And even simpler things like, workable door handles that we've been talking about a lot lately. So while manufacturers are focused on these bright, shiny objects that they can sell at an option to make lots of profits off consumers or even sell via subscription, they're continually balking at getting safety equipment into cars that can actually have a significant and huge impact on people's lives versus a few moments of convenience. So that's something I predict will continue to occur this year, is that manufacturers are going to pump convenience over safety. And then, finally, the gap between the U.S.'s fatality and injury rates versus those in the rest of the world is going to continue to widen this year, because we are not getting this stuff into vehicles and we're not requiring manufacturers to do this. And that's my 2026 predictions.
Before we pass it over to Fred, I have one prediction. Tesla's robo-taxi service will not expand. It will
at all
stall.
By 1-2 vehicles.
Nope. I think it will keep operating in Austin. No one will use it. It will slowly fade away, and Elon will say it never existed. Let's focus on robots. I think that will be the case. I think if Alphabet's stock falls 10% over 2026, which I don't think it will, I think shareholders will put massive pressure on shutting down Waymo as they realize that there's no way for it to make money within the next decade. And it will just keep causing them to set money on fire. Bold predictions. I know. I think the Tesla robotaxi thing, dead. Not going further. Bold. Fred Perkins.
My prediction is that at least one regulatory authority is going to come to our website, look at the checklist, and say, this is a great idea and a great way to hold this developer's feet to the fire to make sure that we're actually going to protect our citizens rather than just give a blank check to this bullshit being presented as pseudo-truth. That's my prediction.
I'd like to thank in advance the safety regulators of Sweden for going ahead and doing this.
I don't want to be exclusive, but anybody, somebody's got to be the first. A lot of people would be willing to be the second, but somebody's got to be the first. And you know who you are out there in our listener community. We've got 7 more to cover here. Should we jump right into that?
I think let's save them off. Let's just jump into recalls. We'll save them for the New Year's. But listeners, I also have another prediction. I have a prediction that you'll want thicker hair, cleaner skin. And one way to possibly do that I've heard is you go to autosafety.org and you click on donate. And it makes your teeth shinier and your posture straighter. Autosafety.org. Click on donate. And now let's do our final recalls of the year 2025. Are we ready for it? First up, this is the easiest job in the world. Ford Motor Company, 45,047 vehicles. The 2025 to 2026 Ford Mustang Mach-E. On affected vehicles, a headlight assembly's LDCMB may fail. A failed LDCMB will result in that headlamp assembly's high beam, low beam, position lamp, daytime running lamp, and turn signal operation becoming inoperative. Inoperative lighting features may result in non-compliance with FMVSS 108. That's not good. What is LDCMB? I'm looking at it. The light emitting diode driver control module B. That's a mouthful.
Yeah, I mean, this one's I think they're throwing it looks like they haven't been able to determine what the root cause of this is yet. So it's going to be a while before owners are able to fix this. Ford is predicting that they're going to have an over-the-air software deployment available in April of 2026. It's a few months, and it's something that owners need to be aware of. I mean, this doesn't appear like it's happening in every Mustang Mach-E out there, but it is happening to a few here and there, and there is a problem that they can't identify. So owners should be heavily aware at this, that their headlights may not be operable at some times, which is an incredibly unsafe way to drive a vehicle. Hopefully, I mean, it looks like this is impacting not just your headlights, but also some of the other lamps in the vehicle. So concerning and not going to be able to be fixed for a few months.
But it does not affect the rear view camera. Next up,
no.
Hyundai, 51,587 vehicles. The 2022 to 2024 Hyundai Tucson. An optional OEM trailer wiring harness accessory designed for towing applications in the specified vehicles may have been installed in a vehicle location susceptible to water ingress. Wait, so this is an optional. This is interesting because this is an optional.
It's like if you get the tow package.
Got it.
Right.
Okay, this is a tow package. And this will affect your stop lamps.
Well, it impacts your stop lamps, but it also can cause electrical short and fire. So, pretty concerning. It looks like they got this, from some dealers, because it's happened in their Speak Up for Safety program, which is something that's only come into play in the last couple of years at Hyundai since they opened their safety center. But it looks like owners are going to have a fix sometime in February, mid-February. And until then, owners, they say you can continue driving the vehicle, but they recommend parking them outside and away from structures until they have the recall remedy. So be aware of that if you own a 22 to 24 Hyundai Tucson with the trailer package. Do not park it in your garage for at least the next couple of months.
What kind of car is it? I thought a Tucson was a sedan. No, it's a truck.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Because I was like, who's putting a trailer package on a sedan? Next up, Mercedes-Benz, 169 vehicles. The 2022 to 2023 Mercedes-Benz EQB 350 4MATIC, the EQB 300, EQB 250, and they've determined that certain of these, they have a risk of fire of the high voltage battery due to a combination of certain production vehicle use conditions. An internal short circuit of a battery cell in the high voltage battery may occur, which may lead to risk of fire. So this is an electric vehicle, I assume.
Yeah.
Yep. There we go.
Electric battery. And at this point, I'm not sure if they have still determined what the root cause is. They're not really sure what's causing these thermal events. So we're a little unsure about when the recall is going to be available. But owners need to be very aware of this.
Okay. And last up, we're going to do an investigation, which we rarely do, but I'm going to predict that this will turn into a recall next year. Let's see. Tesla. That's right. This is a defect petition. Petition cites that the mechanical door release is hidden, unlabeled, and not intuitive to locate during an emergency. The petition cites the mechanical... Oh, I already just said that. This is what we've talked about numerous times, especially in the rear seats, where sometimes when the 12-volt battery system dies, that to get out of the car, you have to go underneath the seats, pull the seat maps up, or the release cable is behind a speaker, or it's hidden inside some pocket. But, when Tesla's response has been like, well, we've updated instructions on our app, because that's what you do when you're in a crash and you're panicked as the car is subsumed in flames. It's like, please, let me take out I don't have internet service. Why can't I get, oh man. This is a horrible, horrible engineering by Tesla. Maybe their VP of engineering should testify.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that should be fixed. I mean, look, if that's, I don't know, this is a circumstance where the fix would be fairly expensive. I mean, you're going to have to, I don't know if, NHTSA would agree to something like, and NHTSA doesn't have a lot of authority to tell Tesla what they're going to do with recall remedies. That's been a big problem with the autopilot recall as well. But, are they going to put, more, they're going to send stickers to customers that they can mark where these things are so that people can get out of the vehicles? Because I think the odds of NHTSA ordering or Tesla agreeing to some type of retrofit that basically creates a manual door handle in a more accessible place for these vehicles is very low, because it's going to be incredibly expensive. And, ultimately, if Tesla doesn't agree to do that, NHTSA would have a long, multi-year battle on their hands trying to force Tesla to do a recall that included that type of, retrofit of the vehicle. Retrofits like that are rare in the recall world because they're expensive, and manufacturers fight them tooth and nail typically, even though they would be the safest course of action for consumers. So that's certainly a concern.
The better course of action for consumers is don't buy a Tesla.
That works too.
Yeah, but you've got to acknowledge that Tesla, per its website, says that they are engineered for safety for everyone. Engineered to be among the safest cars in the world, helping to protect every passenger in every seat. So clearly, they're going to embrace this particular requirement and fix all the doors so nobody else dies due to being cooked alive in a fire.
That's very what would you say? A positive look at it, Fred. I don't know that that's going to happen.
Oh, this is how we end 2025.
It's got to be truth. It's on the internet.
Listeners, thank you so much for sticking with us for another year. This has been our 4th year of doing this. Oh my God. That's been over 200 episodes. If I could do the math better in my head, it's closer to like 220, I think. So many of you have been with us for so long. Thank you for listening, supporting, telling all of your friends, sharing, donating, making our fight worthwhile. Till next year.
Happy New Year, everybody. Keep it safe and keep it fun.
Bye-bye.
For more information, visit www.autosafety.org.